Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Comics. I am Dadderkant, your host, and as always, today we are going to be engaging in a little bit of talk about some of the best known outcasts and misfits out there. We're talking about the X-Men, but we're not talking about the X-Men as you know them today. Um, we're going to go back, way, way back. We're going to go to their very beginnings back in 1963. That's over 50 years ago when the X-Men first hit the scene and became became what we know today. I mean, let's be fair. The X-Men have been around for quite some time, and a large part of what they're doing or what they've done throughout history has been precisely um, that being outcasts, being different than others, and being and reminding us all the time of how hard it is to be an outcast. Now, the first issue came out in 1963, in September of 1963, and it introduced the core team, the very, very basic team of X-Men. And today's show is going to be a little bit shorter. I'm going to be trying for a 30-minute show instead of a 1 hour show. And I'm going to be covering less content in that amount of time. So what we've got is the the X-Men, and the cover itself, the strangest superheroes of all. It starts by telling us from the very beginning that these guys are weird. They're not your average, regular superheroes. And we aren't talking about the guys who gave us a Fantastic Four. I mean, just think about it. The guy covered in rocks is pretty strange. And the guy who can burst into flame, also pretty strange. Stretch like rubber, and the Invisible Woman. They're pretty strange. But if these guys are the strangest superheroes of all, I'm sure we're in for a ride. We're in um for something better, maybe for something very unique and different. Now, what we want to look at when talking about the X-Men is who are these guys and where do they come? And just so you know, I am using a Marvel Unlimited, which is the Marvel Unlimited Comics, which is their platform to access online digital comics. I've been a subscriber since, I don't know, probably 2004, maybe 2007. Sorry, 2008, maybe. Yeah, 2008 was roughly when I started subscribing to them. Now you can also read them in Comixology and other platforms that are out there. So you're going to find them. Now, it is interesting um, to think about who these guys are. Now, there's a lot of things in the cover. And when you look at it, I don't know if this might be a little too small. Let me just zoom in a little bit so we can have a better view into the issues. So, in this sensational in the sensational Fantastic Four style. You got to remember the Fantastic Four were Marvel's go-to comic book before Spidey. Spidey became bigger eventually, but they were their hallmark. That was what made them unique and different from National Comics, DC Comics, and every other um, publication out there. Now, what you have to remember here, you got to look at, and you see, uh, three, four characters, five characters, six characters. I'm trying to go over not what's on the cover, but what is on your screen, and it's. I know I'm cutting off a little bit off of some, and others are not there completely, but I want you guys to get a real sense of what it is that we're looking at. We got in the very front, the top, Dr. Hank McCoy, who will eventually become the world renowned Beast. Then we have Warren Worthington III, better known as Archangel. In the back, looking very fancy, the only woman in the team, Jean Grey, Miss Marvel. It- like, and that's one of those funny things. She was called Miss Marvel at the beginning, before Captain Marvel. Then further down, we have three more characters. We've got the Magneto, Earth's most powerful supervillain, being held back by Bobby Drake, Iceman, Scott Summers, Cyclops, and you can see that at least three of the five original X-Men are going to suffer changes in through time. The original appearance of the characters is slightly different than what we're used to. For example, Iceman doesn't become a block of ice; he's covered in snow. The Beast looks like a human being. He doesn't look like this furry, fluffy, um, lovable, cuddly, but sometimes menacing um, character that we've come to know and appreciate every day. We've got a different look. He's still human. Now, Archangel is the original angel wing, the white wings, the feathery wings, that later in the 1990s will be changed by Apocalypse when he is turned into one of the Riders of the Apocalypse. And his wings will be turned into metal and then turned back into feathers again. But he's called the Angel. He's not called Archangel. And when we come into the first page, we've got a different scene, and we have the other inevitable character of the X-Men. Like you can't think of the X-Men without Professor Xavier, Charles Xavier. Now, what we've got in this very first page, once you open the comic book, that tells you that you're going to be seeing some pretty weird and some pretty strange superheroes. Um, you got this man sitting in a chair, and I will be showing you the image in a minute. I just want you to try to picture it. You have this man in a chair with a blanket around his legs, uh, clearly meaning that he is suffering from some sort of disability and mobility, wearing a very elegant pinstripe, all green and very, very well put. And then you have some pretty weird things. Around him, you have the beast coming in through the window. You have the angel reporting through the air on top of him. Cyclops is coming. And Iceman is coming down an ice pole like a fireman but from where we don't exactly know because they are um, on one floor of what we will later know as the Charles Xavier School for Gifted and Talented Youngsters. Now, important things to be noticed here. Written by Stan Lee, drawn by Jack Kirby, inked by Paul Raymond, and letter by S. Rosen. Now, this is the start of this team. And some of the things that you have to remember to bear in mind when looking at this is when this comes out. It's 1963. Right? It's September 1963. Kennedy is still alive. That's an important part. And not only is Kennedy still alive, the space race is on. You've just had the Cuban Missile Crisis between the US and Cuba not terribly far ago, long ago, and you have this whole tension between the US and the Soviet Union. I mean, we're talking about a very, very tense moment, but we're also talking um, about it, or it's known as the atomic era. Um, if you think about the fact that the first atomic power plant was built on December of 1959, or it was opened and started working on December 20th, 1951. Um, you got to remember, atomic power would have been very, very new to these people. Now, we don't even think about it. A lot of cities around the world, especially in places like the US or Europe, Japan, we've got a ton of atomic power plants all over the place. For example, when you're landing in Fort Lauderdale, um, you can see the power plant off in the distance, and it's there, and it's our way of life, pretty much. But for these people, nuclear energy was this amazing, out of this world thing that came out of war. It came out of these explosions, and it came out of Hiroshima, Nagasaki. It could wipe out the Earth, but it could wipe out life on Earth, but at the same time, it could keep you warm in the winter, and it could light your house, and you had nuclear submarines and atomic powered submarines that were coming online. Um, so these things um, are there. The you know, and that brings us into something that is the biggest change in the consciousness of the American people, and that's nuclear power. It is a new. All right. Welcome to the chat, Dakota. You're asking, why do so many X-Men fans hate Cyclops? Oh, because he's a very complicated and misunderstood character. Sometimes he can be stuck up and despicable, but other times he can be soft and indecisive. And there are reasons to hate Cyclops sometimes. I personally don't hate him. I mean, he's he's one of the central characters of the X-Men, but it's still not easy to understand. You can you can dislike the character when you see him moping and crying because Jean, no, poor Jean, she's dead, and I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna sit here in my bed and cry. That makes you like really? Come on, dude, man up. Jean Grey is stronger than you are. She is braver than you are. She wouldn't want this. She would be stronger, and she would go out there and get him. That that has something to do, but there's no denying the importance and the role of Cyclops in the X-Men. It's such a key role for the character. And you couldn't have the team of the X-Men without Cyclops. And um just just look at this scene. This scene gives you a sense of the kind of character that Cyclops started out as and where it will develop over time. We got here Angel, Beast, Iceman, and Cyclops. And Cyclops is going like, "Come on, Angel, let's tilt the professor's chair back and make him more comfortable." And with pleasure, Cyclops, old man. We want the professor comfortable while he puts us through our paces. So Cyclops is a little bit like a teacher's pet, especially in these first years. And then you have Bobby and Hank in the back fighting, uh, and it's like this whole dynamic of the team. It's just there, and Cyclops just doesn't really fit into that vibe, right? Now, one thing is that Professor X hasn't said a word yet. All of his dialogue so far in the first issue is thought bubbles, and you can see the machines and many of the elements of the X-Men are already there. You have the danger room, you have these deadly exercises that the X-Men are going through, and in the meantime, Professor X is sitting in a chair, not a wheelchair. He's just sitting in a chair comfortably with a blanket, as if it was an old man. But he doesn't look as old as it feels. Um, Now we get another one of those motifs that will be central to the entire X-Men mythos, and it's that they are not Homo sapiens. And it's right here. They're doing all these exercises, and Beast is trying to catch Angel, um, and Angel is doing his things, and then the professor asks him, "Are you receiving my thought clearly?" And then Angel says, "Mistakes are for Homo sapiens, sir, not the angel." So that is going to be one of the most prevalent themes throughout the entire book. Uh, I have this personality. This is my friend. I can relate to Scott Summer. Ooh, that's rough to hear. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I can totally understand Scott, and that's why I said I don't necessarily hate him. I don't dislike him. Sometimes it's like, come on, you can be sad later. That's the point. Is that he's not the only one who has lost somebody in the X Men. They've all lost somebody at different points in their lives. None more so than Wolverine. He's lost even himself at one point, right? With the loss of his memory, and Rogue loses her family not through death, but because she can't touch them, and many of them are orphans, and well, Magneto lost everybody in the Holocaust and in the Nazi concentration camps, which is what leads him to becoming all these horrible things that he is. This continuation of the spiral of violence. It's just the way that Scott um, faces it is not what you would expect of a team leader. That's probably it, and that's probably one of the genius parts about the character is that that makes him more human. That makes him a little bit more relatable and a little bit more humane. More, he's not perfect. He's not the perfect leader. He makes mistakes. He's not this infallible know-it-all leader. right? So so it's there, but it's all of them. They are there. And going back to what I was saying about the relation with Homo sapiens, right? Um, what are the X-Men specifically, right? And the next page after, Angel makes this whole message of, oh, mistakes are for Homo sapiens. We are better than that. We get Angel getting his behind whacked around the danger room, and Professor X, um, Mateo, welcome to chat. Joe, which Joe? Because there's a few Joes. Now, I warned you against overconfidence. This sudden sound concussion is to test your survival ability. You must not fall to the ground. Right? Uh, it's Charles Xavier reminding Angel that he's not infallible. He is not perfect. He is, in fact, fallible. And it's a little bit, and it sets that whole tone of the relationship between the X-Men and the non-mutants and normal people. It's that whole vibe of, you're no superheroes, you're no Superman, right? Yes, you are mutants. Yes, you have wings. Yes, you can fly, but you can't do that. Actually, Mateo, I'm going to totally ignore that question. All right. Because, and especially Warren Worthington. He's Warren Worthington the third. He's a rich guy. He's really, really rich. He's loaded. And he's obviously white, and blonde, and blue eyed. And they're all white. All of the X-Men originally are white. Later on, we will have other characters. We'll have African Americans, we'll have Native Americans, we'll have Latinos, we'll have the famous Canadian, right? And all those are things that are there from the very beginning, right? That separation, there's that whole message of, you're no better, right? Don't be overconfident, don't be cocky. Now, another thing that is there is Iceman's sense of humor. You see, Professor X says something to him, and he goes like, "Well, if he's gonna treat me like a kid, I'm gonna behave like a kid." And there he goes. He dresses himself up as a cliche quintessential snowman with the carrot nose, and this only works in the world where Iceman is not covered in ice but is covered in snow. So those are the little things, and but he will still be the jokester, the prankster throughout the entire series. A little bit of comic relief. But you might have noticed that I'm going over the pages of this book, and even though she is there on the cover, she is nowhere to be found. Not yet. So, 8 pages in, we got another typical X-Men scene. We've got everybody fighting the Beast on the ground and Cyclops and Angel, and they're going one on top of another. Um, and then we have this mental command from Professor X going like, "Enough! The lesson is over. We must turn our energies to different matters. Return to your places at once." And you got to think, this has been a third of the book. One third of the book has been dedicated to establishing the relationships between the characters, who they are, what they can do, but not much has been told. But now they receive this explosive power of a mental command, and they sober up immediately, and that's the power of Charles Xavier behind the X-Men, right? So here's where we go. In page number 8, Charles Xavier speaks for the first time. He's only thought at the X-Men so far, but this time he is going to speak. And it's, I congratulate you all. You have mastered reading my thoughts perfectly, and now I shall return to normal speech communication. And he does this to introduce something. And it's interesting that this happens right here. You may be interested to learn that at this very moment I sense a taxi approaching our main gate. Within that vehicle is a new pupil, a most attractive young lady. And he just drops that out there, and these guys run out to the window, and they are like, and this is where you remember these are young men. It doesn't say exactly how old um is are each of them, but they're young. Um, so it's only normal, only fitting that they are gawking out the window at this beautiful woman who is coming in, and so they go and they say, like, "Oops, we got to change out of our X-Men uniforms and dress normally." And then we have the first appearance of one of the X-Men's most beloved characters and a quite complicated story around this character. She will become the center of so many problems, so many things that, I mean, we've all heard of Dark Phoenix, and we've seen the first X-Men movie where she sacrifices herself, and it's all there. This is her first appearance, walking in, and then Professor Xavier goes like, "Come in, my child," and this conversation is where we get also not only the introduction of Jean Grey, but what mutants are. And it's when she says, "I think you already suspect, Miss Grey. You see, I can read your thoughts quite clearly, and I know all about your unusual talent. She's a mutant. You possess an extra power, one which ordinary humans do not. That is why I call my students X-Men, for extra power." And that's typical Stanley, that extra power bit. Um, Now we talk about chromosomes and the unknown factor, but it's right there. X stands for extra power. And then this lovely lady who's dressed like a very suburbanite, very traditional, well put young white girl from somewhere in the suburbs of New York meets up with four dashing young men, perfectly dressed, and even Hank McCoy, who is big, is properly dressed, right? And here's where he Charles Xavier introduces the team, and he introduces everybody for the first time with their full non-mutant names. So Hank McCoy, known to us as the Beast; Bobby Drake, nicknamed Iceman; Slim Summers, our human Cyclops; and Warren Worthington III, who is called the Angel. Boys, this is Miss Jean Grey. She will be known as Marvel Girl. I mean, just think about this. She didn't know what kind of school she was walking into, and all of a sudden she's surrounded by these guys, and they're all hammering at her, going at it, and basically saying like, "Yep, you're part of the team. You're an X-Man now. You have no, there's nothing there." But uh, and we have this entire scene around it. But I've always thought that there must have been a telepathic exchange between um Charles and Jean. Hmm. And we see the introduction of Jean's telekinesis and her power to move things. But the entire issue, if you think about it, we're already down to half the book, page 12 out of 25, when we have the first real appearance of Magneto. Because even though they were all in the cover, except Professor X, this is the first time introducing Magneto. No, um, he is in a secret laboratory near Cape Citadel, and in the image, the face, he's a very mad scientist kind of character at the beginning. He is not. He has not yet developed into this highly complicated political being that he will be later on. He is a mad scientist who wants to show his power and to make Homo sapiens bow to Homo superior. That is the baseline conflict of the entire X-Men series. That's what it's all about. That's what everything turns out to be. It's us versus them, with the X-Men being on the losing side and like them being the discriminated, um, put down minority who are different. Now, Magneto attacks a military installation. Like always, he is given to flashy acts to show his power, right? Um, Now there's there's a certain showmanship to Magneto, hmm, and appearing in as though by magic over the heads of the astonished troops. Surrender to base or I'll take it by force. Magneto. Nobody knows who he is, but all of a sudden he's got this military base and he's warning them like, surrender and I'll take this base by force. And the colonel's going like, what is this, some prank? And another one's going like, no sir, this is no joke. This is a real threat. Which is, and then Magneto does or brings about one of the worst fears of the time. He takes control of a nuclear warhead and fires it out. Um, Now, he doesn't just kill anybody. He rockets the. He sends a rocket, a missile, into the water next to an unmanned ship that was there for target practice, right? But the military, being the way they are, say like, we're not going to surrender, and it's their instinct. Their instinct is to fight. They're not just going to give up. So again, they try to fight Magneto, but of course they can't stop him. He just walks into the base, and we've all seen this image of Magneto walking sedately and stately into any place he pleases, and guns and bullets, and nothing can go past his magnetic field. And he is claiming things, and he's already talking about Homo superior and being better, right? And at that same time, we go to the X-Men and we got um, Jean Grey putting on her outfit and very pretty. Uh, and of course, all the boys are there on top of her all the time. But more importantly than that, it's this uh this whole idea that yes, they are mutants, yes, they are different, yes, they have superpowers, but at the same time they're relatable. They're schoolboys with a schoolboy crush on this beautiful girl. I I, I wonder they're around college age. Um, they don't look like high school kids, although at the time they could have perfectly been. But there's this whole sense of normalcy around them until you see things like Angel releasing his wings from straps, like this specially built suit to keep his wings hidden. And that's when you see the strangeness of it all. But they're pretty much your everyday bunch of teenagers, right? Or young adults. Um, Now, they come in and we get their first fight against Magneto. But more importantly, more important than their first fight against Magneto is the entire situation of mistrust, right? And of course, we get all the acrobatics and the flying, and they freeze the missiles and the shrapnel, and but then, um, when everything is said and done, at the end of the day, we get the military calling them back up and saying, "You call yourselves the X-Men. I will not ask you to reveal your true identities, but I promise you that before this day is over, the name X-Men will be the most honored in my command." And the closing tag is, "You have just finished the newest, most unusual tale in the annals of modern magazines, but the best is yet to come. For fantasy at its greatest, don't miss issue number 2 of X-Men, the strangest superheroes of all." And it's that sense of wonder, of strangeness, that is going to pervade the entire series of the X-Men. Now, they have dealt with a, a whole issue, a large range of issues throughout their run in the 56 years that they've been out and about. But more importantly, they're still at it. And the basic elements of the X-Men are there. Their normalcy, their sense of everyday Joe, of just common guys trying to make a living in a world that doesn't like them, having to hide who they are so that they won't be discriminated. And this whole idea that there's Homo sapiens and Homo superior, that somehow because they have these inborn gifts, they're better than regular human beings. But as I told you at the beginning, guys, today I was going to make it a little bit shorter. I hope you've enjoyed this show. Next time, I will be doing something similar. I'll be looking at the origin story of another character. And I will be doing a series of origins all around the 1960s. I will be focusing on Marvel for 2 or 3 more episodes. Then I'll shift over to DC Comics, do a little bit of the same thing, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the crossings between them and how you can see the whole relationship between two publishing houses. But